Okay, I have got to revitalize the Russian economy. I'm in third place and I'm falling behind the French and the British. Okay, let's take a look at goods. Liquor, a staple of the Russian economy. Vodka, the national product of Russia. And, wait, nobody's drinking vodka? What have I done to my economy? Oh no, no one's drinking vodka? Did I accidentally institute prohibition while I was at it? Wait a minute. What's going on here? Oh, that's right. I'm the world's largest producer of opium. And who wants to get drunk when they can get high? Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Counterfactual Gaming. The gaming channel where if there's something historical or canonical to do in a video game, we don't do it. Now, before we get started today, I'd like to ask you to go ahead and like and subscribe if you like the content that you're seeing here. And if you have suggestions on what else I should be doing in video games, go ahead and put a comment down below. Or if you have a question about the game that I'm playing, put a comment down below and I'll do my best to give you an answer. May not be a good answer, but I'll have an answer for you nonetheless. For today, we're going to be looking at the Russian Empire and the sale of liquor. Now, this is going to be a particularly enjoyable run with the Russian Empire because it deals with things that I like. Alcoholic beverages, and economics. And those familiar with the history of the Russian Empire no doubt know how important vodka was economically to the Russian Empire, all the way from the time of the early czars up until the czar banned the sale of liquor in the Russian Empire right at the beginning of World War I, only for the sale and production of liquor to be resumed under Joseph Stalin when he took the helm of the Soviet Union. But what we're doing today won't take us all the way to communist Russia. We're going to instead be focusing on Imperial Russia and the impact of liquor on the Russian economy. And what we're going to be doing today is creating a Russian economy that produces almost zero liquor and has almost zero demand for liquor. And we're not going to institute prohibition to do it. But before we turn to the gameplay in Victoria, let's talk about the importance of liquor and vodka to the Russian government and economy. Now, there are a number of cliches and stereotypes about vodka and Russian culture, and I'm not going to engage with any of that because I'm more focused on the actual historical place of liquor and vodka production and sales in the economy of the Russian Empire. Turns out that for a very long time, all the way back to Ivan the Terrible, the government of the Tsar maintained a very lucrative monopoly on the sale of vodka. This means that when we talk about the liquor industry in Imperial Russia, we're not talking about a bunch of merchants just selling it willy-nilly. We're talking about the crown itself deriving income from all sales of vodka in the country. I did some reading up on this, and the figure of 1/3 of government revenue coming from vodka. I did some historical reading up on this, and the figure of 1/3 kept popping up in my research. And multiple sources kept telling me that the government of the Tsar basically had 1/3 of its revenue coming from the sale of vodka. Now, I'm not sure if that's the entire government or just like the revenue going specifically to the Tsar and discounting some other sources of revenue, but it made a big difference in the Tsar's finances for centuries. So much so that there had been temperance movements in Russia before 1914, but they never went anywhere because no Tsar in his right mind would cut off such a huge supply of revenue. All that changed, though, in 1914 when the Tsar decided to ban the sale of liquor and vodka at the beginning of World War I. Now, from what I've read, this was partially done as a moral thing, like an embrace of temperance as a moral ideal, but also had its roots in poor military and conscription performance during the war with Japan in 1905. There were drunken riots when conscription took place during the war in 1905, and even worse, there were reports of the Japanese army encountering Russian troops in significant numbers who were too drunk to fight, and they would just, kill them easily. This no doubt contributed to harmful stereotypes of Russians as merely vodka-fueled lunatics. But for our purposes, if you were the Tsar going into the biggest war you could imagine in 1914, you might think to yourself, it could be more important to have a sober people fight the war than it would be to get that revenue. And so the sale of vodka was ended by the government. Now, I read a bunch of stuff. In multiple cases, historians didn't say that the vodka prohibition caused the Russian Revolution, but it exacerbated all of the problems that led to the Russian Revolution. The government lost a huge portion of its revenue. There were transportation problems because the sale of vodka was just ended instantly, even though there were literal train loads of vodka trying to go across the country to be sold. And it had a depressive effect on the morale of the Russian people. What I can say is that while it certainly wouldn't have doomed the Russian Empire by itself, if you were playing a game like Victoria 3, you wouldn't probably end the source of 1/3 of your revenue right at the start of a major war. Like, that's just like a crazy thing to do. But of course, here at Counterfactual Gaming, we don't do the historical thing. So you might think, well, that means I'm going to make even more liquor. But no, I'm going to instead find a way to end the dependence on liquor revenue and the cultural dependence on liquor as a consumer product before 1914. In other words, what I'm going to do is try to achieve the goals that the Tsar had set out in 1914 by not just instantly banning liquor, but by restructuring the entire economy of the Russian Empire starting in 1836, so that by the time I get to 1914, I will have a Russian Empire that in no way depends upon liquor at all. In fact, when I was originally coming up with the idea for this video, I set myself a time limit of getting this all accomplished by 1914. But actually, I get it done even before the beginning of the 20th century. Now, I have a secondary gameplay reason for going against history in this case. It's not just that it's fun to do this differently, but there are some economic benefits to weaning your country off of liquor. And we're going to talk about those. But I'm going to spoil part of it by saying, if you don't have a need for liquor in your country, then you don't have very much of a need for sugar either. But we're going to get to that in a bit. So to begin with, we have to plan our strategy from day one. And part of that plan, as you can see, I've started working on here in my save game at 1837. You can see I'm starting to push south. And I'm going to clean up all these little puppet states here as I go through this, but I'm pushing south for a reason. But to explain that reason, we have to talk about what liquor does. Liquor isn't just a good that does consumer stuff. It is a good that also has military applications, but we're not going to worry about that right now. We're only going to worry about what needs liquor meets for your people. And the answer is it meets intoxicant needs. Now, those of you who are familiar with my video about China will note that intoxicants are really important because, one, all pops consume intoxicants. They like to devote some of their money to intoxicants. But intoxicants come in 3 flavors: liquor, tobacco, and opium. But the 3 goods do not all equally satisfy the demand for intoxicants. Liquor is the default good, but tobacco and opium are more efficient per unit produced to satisfy the needs of intoxicants. Now, notice I said per unit produced, not by cost, because the cost can change. Like right now, I have 27.9 as my cost for liquor, but if I go down here, tobacco is at 56.4. Tobacco's efficiency at meeting the need for intoxicants is in part predicated on its cost. It has a significantly higher cost than liquor right now, and that significantly higher cost is in no way offset by the fact that 1.33 units of tobacco will substitute for 1 unit of liquor, because it's still cheaper for people to buy 1 unit of liquor. Okay, fair enough. We all understand that. But what it's also a lot of players don't understand is that goods substitution isn't purely fungible. What I mean by that is pops do not just want the cheapest good to satisfy their need. They want a variety of goods. They usually want at least two different goods to satisfy whatever their need is. So even if I have the best opium in the country or the best price for tobacco, pops will still want some liquor and opium. This means in order to get them off the demand for liquor, they need enough tobacco and opium at the right price to make them abandon the need for liquor. So if I'm going to acquire enough tobacco and opium, how am I going to do that? Well, this is how we're going to do it. If we look at opium on the map for a second, you can see that my conquest direction is taking me through various areas where I can plant opium. Through here, Afghanistan, you can plant a ton of opium there. All of this area that we're looking at right here can be used to plant opium. And tobacco will grow here in Punjab. Now, there are other places in the Russian Empire that will grow tobacco, here and here. But those areas are not going to be really enough. I really want to drive that price down. So we really need to conquer all the way to Punjab. Also, Punjab will support so many different plantations and farms that Punjab will also supply dye and silk and tea. Other things that the economy needs. But I want tons of tobacco and opium. And we're going to take a look at when I've started that process. We're going to take a look at my construction of tobacco plantations in 1867. It was a close run thing, but I did manage to take Punjab before the East India Company did. We're also still in the process of conquering some stuff down here. But this area right here that I control right here by 1867 is enough to supply the opium and tobacco that I need. The rest of the stuff that I might conquer in that area is just the gravy on top. You can see that I've been incorporating Punjab because, of course, I incorporate all colonial territories, and I've started my process of growing tobacco on plantations in Punjab. I have not started growing too many opium plantations just yet. I've got some going in Turkmenia, but and I've got some started in Uzbekia, but it's the Russian Empire, so I don't have like infinite money to throw at this. But I do have a political problem. Only recently was I able to pass agrarianism for the Russian Empire, which is allowing me to do more construction thanks to contribution efficiency from aristocrats and farmers. But what I really want to do is get interventionism in place, and I haven't been able to do it. The politics of the Russian Empire are making it difficult. If I could get interventionism in place, I'd probably be able to burn through this investment pool faster, but I'm doing the best I can here. Again, it's Victoria 3. It's a marathon and not a sprint. But by 1867, I've got the area conquered I need to acquire all of the tobacco and opium I need to satisfy Russian intoxicants. All right, let's talk about production methods for a second. It's 1878. I have not quite gotten to the point where I want to be, but I'm edging into the territory of beginning to swap production methods around. Let's talk about, though, why I would want to get rid of liquor production at all. Liquor is produced from a couple of different sources. Rye farms have a secondary production method that lets them produce liquor. But for most countries, you will be getting a lot of your liquor from food industries. Now, if we take a look at the food industry here, you'll notice that there's three ways of doing distilleries. You can just prioritize grocery production, which means nothing. You're just making groceries. You've got pot stills and you have patent stills. Pot stills and patent stills require sugar and reduce the number of groceries you are producing. Now, patent stills require sugar and reduce the number of groceries you're producing, but they also require glass. But patent stills are way more efficient at generating liquor on a per grain, per sugar basis than pot stills are. So the question is between those two production methods, like, do you want to spend glass to get more booze or not? But when we're looking at the economics of the food industry, if I'm not going to produce any liquor, I don't need any sugar for either of those production methods. I just don't. What about these other production methods? Well, there are other production methods over here that utilize sugar, sweeteners, and the ever popular baking powder. This is where things get complicated. A lot of players like to use sugar to speed up or boost the output of groceries. But you're under no obligation to do it. And while sweeteners and baking powder are technically more efficient on a grain to groceries basis, the reality is you're using a lot of sugar plus grain to equal groceries. But if you just sit at bakeries, and if you just swap to prioritized grocery construction, you don't need any sugar. In fact, sugar is going to be primarily used by your food industries. Now, Pops can use sugar as a luxury food item. Just to be clear, it is a luxury food item, but it's a luxury food item alongside meat, fruit, groceries. So as long as you've got plenty of groceries, fruit, and meat, Pops are not going to care whether you have sugar. But if I'm going to move away from liquor, and I'm going to do something else to get my intoxicants in my people, I can just eliminate the need for sugar entirely. And if I don't need sugar, then I don't need to grow sugar in my own plantations, and I can not worry about whether I'm doing potatoes or apple orchard in my rye farms. I don't have to think about it at all. Also, I have stray millet farms. I will be destroying those later. I just haven't gotten around to it. If you're familiar with my content in Victoria 3, you know how much I hate millet farms. But anyway, I don't have to even worry about this. I can either just maintain single crop, or I can do apple orchards and just export what little sugar I get. And boom, it's fine. What I don't need to do is go through and conduct imperialism and colonization in order to turn large portions of land into sugar plantations to supply my need for sugar. By eliminating liquor from the equation, and by using merely the bakeries in the food industry, I can just ignore sugar and I don't have to think about it. In other words, if you're paying attention, that means with enough tobacco and enough opium, sugar becomes a non-issue if you plan your economy correct, which is exactly what we're going to be doing. I don't know how this affects the health of the people in your country, whether you'd rather them having problems with obesity due to sugar, you'd rather them be getting high from opium, or destroying their lung health with tobacco. That's something you have to decide on what you're going to be doing. But from economic reasons, I don't have to worry about sugar if I've got enough tobacco and opium. In order to clean up my customs union, I end up annexing Finland in a diplomatic play here. I'm sorry, but that's just the way it has to be. Now, by 1880, I'm ready to make a transition away from booze to tobacco and opium. So we're going to prioritize grocery construction. We're going to end the use of pot stills, which is going to dump out 2.5K in liquor a week. That's just going to go away. And if we go here, By the way, you can see my grain prices are really super low at this point. We'll talk about that in a minute. I'm going to run it for a week, and we're going to see what things look like. Okay. Demand for liquor is still pretty high. Wait a minute. I'm still producing a ton of liquor via subsistence farms. Okay, so I'm going to have to clean up a bunch of subsistence farms to really get myself away from liquor production. And here's the funny part. I'm still the 7th largest producer of liquor in the world just via subsistence farms. So this isn't good enough. I'm going to have to clamp down on liquor even more. But I do want to take a look at tobacco and opium. Wow, opium is really cheap. Let's take a look at what this is going to look like in a couple of years. It takes some effort, but by 1898, I've practically removed all liquor production from home. I've got a couple of subsistence farms and subsistence pastures that are generating like micro amounts of liquor, but yeah, I'm not a significant producer of liquor. I'm actually importing liquor, but not because my pops need it. I'm importing the liquor for my barracks. I really need the barracks to have liquor so that we can have medical stuff for them. But I'm certainly not relying on domestic production, and people are barely drinking any. Because what they really want are tobacco and everyone's favorite, opium. I have a ridiculous amount of opium. Now, in order to bring these prices down so far that nobody wants liquor, I want you to take a look at how much opium I have to produce. First of all, I am #1 in the world by a ridiculous margin, but that's not a surprise. I'm certainly consuming about 9,000 opium a week, and I produce 31,000 opium a week. I have to export a ton just to sort of make up the trade imbalance because, the cost of opium is negative 71% compared to base price. That's really low. That is insanely low, especially given that opium satisfies intoxicant needs 1.66 per unit compared to liquor. Now, you would think that means that my opium plantations must be dying. But they're actually maintaining decent profits. They're not maintaining the best profits in the world. And you can tell they're still trying to build up their cash reserves. This is not a bad balance, even at this ridiculously low price. This one is also profitable. It's not super profitable, but it is making enough money to sustain itself. The only reason I've got unemployed people in this state is because I don't have any other work for them. The plantations would hire more people if they could. I even have this plantation that's desperately trying to hire a couple of more people. We got these. Let's go to the ones in Uzbekistan. Those are always the good ones. This one's making okay money. They still got to fill up their cash reserves. Otherwise, they are doing fine. What about tobacco? Tobacco is in even better shape. It's at negative 51.3% of price, which is not quite as bad as the price of opium. I'm, of course, not just the world's biggest supplier of tobacco, but I'm the world's biggest supplier by a large margin. Pops aren't buying as much tobacco as you might think they are, but that's because they would prefer to spend more money on opium. But that's okay. I have exports to the French market, and apparently only the French market and the Taiping market, which are helping to buoy up my prices. Now, if we look again at the tobacco plantations in Punjab, they are doing great. They are doing awesome. The only reason I have not expanded them further is I need some other things in Punjab. Like, I have to have dye, and I have not invented artificial dyes yet. And I need some tea. But tobacco, yeah. Tobacco is doing fine. In fact, let's take a look at my pops for a second. Okay, how does this work for us? Okay, capitalists. These capitalists are consuming tons of goods. Let's take a look. All right. They're buying tons of fine art, services, luxury furniture, porcelain, and groceries. All right. Well, how are they doing in terms of... Wow, they are buying all of the tobacco that they want and all the opium they want, but the prices are so low as it's barely making any kind of dent in their income at all. In fact, it's like they spend so little on opium and tobacco, satisfying, to be clear, they are satisfying their needs, but they're spending so little percentage of their income on it that they have all kinds of disposable income to throw at other things like fruit and coffee. It's amazing. I've brought those prices down so far that these people are like, why would we ever bother drinking liquor? Like, there's no point in them drinking liquor. In fact, they're spending way more money on wine as a luxury drink and on tea and coffee as luxury drinks than they would on intoxicants. That's how far we brought the price down. These guys are doing really well, too. Look at that. They are making all kinds of bank. Let's take a look at sugar for a second. Okay, I talked about how sugar is not that useful. Now, I am the world's largest producer of sugar, but you'll notice that I'm exporting most of it because my pops are barely consuming any. And it's my rye farms that are making sugar. So I just export the vast majority of my sugar to other markets because I don't need it. And because I don't need sugar, I don't have to make a whole lot of rye farms in order to make up that sugar difference, or I don't have to plant sugar in sugar plantations to make up that sugar difference. I am much more concerned with my ever popular wheat farms because that's my favorite way to get grain. Because, one, I do need the grain. But two, wheat farms, of course, as always, generate wine, which is the big money maker for them. And how are my food industries doing? Well, let's take a look at the one in Brest. This is the big one. This is my big food industry. Now, it's turning grain, iron, and fish into groceries. We are not producing any booze, and this thing is producing a ton of profit. It's also employing a bunch of people too. It's got shopkeepers, machinists, and some laborers. Now, the disadvantage here is if you use pot stills or patent stills, you would employ some more engineers, machinists, and shopkeepers. And if you swap to better PMs here, you would lose laborers in favor of machinists and engineers. But why waste the sugar doing that? I mean, why bother doing that at all? This industry is perfectly healthy. It is doing just fine. It's also under merchant guilds. I kind of wish I could make it privately owned, but you can't do that without sweeteners or baking powder. But shopkeepers, let's take a look at this again. You'll notice that with shopkeepers, I just have shopkeepers. I don't have any aristocrats or capitalists, but I'm still getting 4.42K in reinvestment from this food industry alone every week. It's making tons of money, and it is contributing to my wonderful investment pool. Now, it's not beating out, of course, it's not beating out things like tooling workshops and glassworks and coal mines, because those are going to be the big earners. But we are making all kinds of money with groceries. All we do is we turn grain into groceries. Now, I'm only the world's second largest producer, but that's because I don't need any more groceries, really. I don't really have a need for that. And part of the reason I don't need any more groceries is because of this. One of the ways that I got rid of all of my subsistence farms, or most of them at any rate, was by opening up a ton of livestock ranches, which means that I have a lot of meat, which is a luxury food item. It's also a basic food item, but meat is a luxury food item. So I don't need any more groceries because everyone has steaks to eat. And that about wraps up our video for today. I hope you enjoyed me weaning the Russian Empire off of liquor dependency by getting it dependent on nicotine and opium. And while the weather here is rainy and bad today, I hope wherever you are that you are having a pleasant day.